There's a moment most men don't notice because it doesn't look dramatic. No fight, no clear rejection, no obvious ending. Just a shift. She becomes quieter, slightly distant. Not cold, but not the same. And you feel it. That small change in her energy, the way she replies, the way she looks at you, the way something feels off. And in that moment, most men do the same thing. They lean in, they try harder, they explain more, they give more attention, thinking it will fix the distance. But here's the part nobody tells you. That moment, that's not when you should move closer. That's when you should understand what's really happening. Because attraction doesn't disappear suddenly. It shifts quietly, internally. And if you don't understand the shift, you start reacting to symptoms instead of the cause. You try to fix something that isn't broken. And in doing that, you create the distance you are trying to avoid. Because the truth is, when she pulls back slightly, she's not always losing interest. Sometimes she's testing the space, testing the dynamic, testing how you respond, when things are no longer easy, and your reaction in that moment tells her everything. Not what you say, but how you move. Do you chase? Do you panic? Do you try to hold on tighter? Or do you stay grounded and let the moment reveal itself? Because the man who reacts emotionally confirms her doubts. But the man who stays centered creates something different. Curiosity, respect, and sometimes a deeper pull than before. So in this video, we're going to break down what's really happening in that moment, why she pulls back, what it actually means, and how the way you respond can either kill attraction or bring it back stronger than before. Before we start, a quick reminder, the real transformation doesn't happen on YouTube, it happens inside the community. If these videos have opened your eyes, what's inside will rebuild your mindset completely. It's not just a course, it's a brotherhood, a private space where men master attraction, emotional control, and the psychology of power. You don't join for a month, you join for life. Every future course, book, and lesson is yours forever. No subscriptions, no limits, just one decision that changes your direction. If you're serious about growth, discipline, and purpose, click the link below. Join the community, enroll once, grow forever. Let's dive in. Point number 1. Why she creates distance without explaining. That first moment when she pulls back is rarely random, even if it feels that way to you. Even if nothing obvious changed, because most emotional shifts don't happen loudly. They happen quietly internally, in ways that are not immediately visible from the outside. She doesn't always sit there and decide, I'm going to be distant now. It's not that conscious. It's more like a feeling that grows slowly, a slight drop in emotional intensity. A moment where things don't feel as engaging as before, and instead of explaining it, instead of analyzing it out loud, she simply adjusts her behavior. She replies a little slower, she invests a little less, she creates space without saying she needs it. And this is where most men get confused, because they expect clarity, they expect communication, they expect her to explain what changed. But attraction does not always work through clear logic. It works through feeling, and when the feeling shifts, behavior follows. Now understand this clearly. This pullback is not always about losing interest. Sometimes it is about recalibrating, about stepping back to see how the connection feels without constant input, about checking whether what she felt before was real or just the result of continuous interaction. Because when things are always present, always flowing, always easy, the mind doesn't question them. But when there's space, the mind starts evaluating. It starts asking, what is this actually? Is this something I really feel or something I got used to? And that internal process creates distance. Not rejection, distance. Now here is the part most men miss. The pullback is not the problem. The reaction to the pullback is, because the moment you feel that shift, the moment you sense that distance, your instinct is to close the gap, to bring things back to how they were, to fix the feeling as quickly as possible. And that instinct feels right, but it creates pressure. Because now your behavior is not coming from stability, it is coming from fear of losing the connection. And that fear is felt. Even if you don't say it, even if you try to hide it, it shows in how you move, how you respond, how quickly you try to reconnect. And that is what changes her perception. Not the pullback itself, but how you respond to it. Because the moment you chase the distance, you confirm that the distance affects you. And once she feels that the dynamic shifts, most men see distance and move toward it. The man who understands sees distance and stays grounded inside it. And that difference is where everything changes. Point number 2. What she's really looking for when she pulls back. When she pulls back, it doesn't just create space. It reveals something, not about her, but about you. Because in that moment, your reaction becomes visible in a way it wasn't before. And that is exactly why this phase feels like a test, even if she doesn't consciously plan it that way. She is not always testing you intentionally, not sitting there thinking, let me see how he reacts. But the dynamic itself creates a situation where your behavior is exposed, where your emotional control, your confidence, your stability are no longer hidden behind easy interaction. Because when everything is smooth, when the connection flows naturally, it is easy to feel confident. It is easy to feel in control. It is easy to appear strong. But when something shifts, when the energy drops slightly, when her attention pulls back, that is when your real state shows. Do you stay calm or do you become restless? Do you hold your position or do you start adjusting? Do you observe or do you react? And those responses tell her more than anything you ever said before. Now understand this clearly. What she is feeling in that moment is not just about you. It is about the experience, about whether the connection feels stable or fragile, about whether it can exist without constant effort, or whether it depends on you holding it together all the time. Because if the connection collapses the moment she steps back slightly, it means it was never stable to begin with. It was maintained. And what is maintained requires effort. But what is real sustains itself. So when she creates distance, even unconsciously, she is stepping back to feel the connection from a different angle, without your constant presence, without your constant input. And in that space, your reaction becomes the defining factor. If you chase, if you try to fix it, if you push for clarity, you signal something not through words, but through behavior. You signal that you are affected, that you are dependent on the interaction staying exactly the same, and that creates pressure. But if you stay grounded, if you allow the space to exist without trying to control it, if you continue your life without making the shift the center of your attention, something else happens. She feels that the connection is not fragile. She feels that you are not easily shaken. She feels that your presence does not depend on her behavior. And that creates respect. Because now, instead of you reacting to her, she becomes aware of you, not in a loud way, but in a quiet, observing way. Most men fail the moment things change. The man who understands reveals himself when things are no longer easy, and that is what she feels. Point number 3. Why not chasing makes her lean in. There is a very specific point where the dynamic changes, not because of something you say, not because of something you do loudly, but because of something you don't do. And that is the moment you choose not to chase the distance. Because chasing feels natural. It feels like effort. It feels like care. And in many situations, effort and care are good things. But in this moment, when she is already stepped back slightly, when space has already been created, chasing does something different. It adds pressure. Because now, instead of allowing the connection to breathe, you are trying to control it, trying to bring it back to a certain level, trying to remove the discomfort of the shift. And that effort, even when it comes from a good place, changes how you are perceived. It makes your presence feel dependent on her response. It makes your attention feel reactive. And that reduces your weight in the interaction. But when you don't chase, when you allow the space to exist without trying to close it immediately, something subtle begins to happen. At first it feels like nothing, no big reaction, no dramatic shift, just space. But inside that space, something is moving. Because now, instead of you filling the gap stays open. And when a gap stays open, the mind starts to notice it. Not just yours, hers. She starts becoming aware of the difference. The difference between how things felt before and how they feel now. And that awareness creates curiosity, not force. Not dramatic, but real. Because now she is not being pulled. She is observing. She is feeling. She is starting to ask herself small questions. Why didn't he react? Why is he so calm? Did the shift not affect him? And those questions create something powerful, attention, because attention grows where there is uncertainty. Now understand this clearly. This is not about ignoring her or pretending you don't care, because that creates disconnection. What creates attraction is grounded presence. The ability to stay emotionally stable even when the dynamic changes. Because when you don't chase, you send a signal, a quiet one but a strong one. You signal that your state does not depend on her behavior. You signal that you are not trying to control the moment. You signal that you are comfortable with space. And comfort with space is rare, because most people fear it. Now here is the deeper effect. When you don't chase, she starts leaning in. Not always physically at first, but mentally, emotionally. Because now the gap is still there, and something inside her wants to understand it. Most men move toward distance. The man she feels allows distance to exist, and in that space, she starts moving closer. Point number 4, when she starts thinking about you again. After the space is created, after you don't chase, after the dynamic stops being forced, something begins to change quietly inside her. Not in a dramatic way, not in a way she immediately recognizes, but in a way that slowly grows. And that is the emotional shift. At first it is not even emotional, it is just awareness. She notices the difference, the gap absence of what used to be there. And that awareness starts small. A thought here, a question there, nothing heavy, nothing urgent, but it repeats, and repetition changes everything. Because the brain does not return to something again and again without attaching importance to it. And the more her mind revisits the shift, the more it begins to feel like something that matters. Now understand this clearly. She is not sitting there deciding to think about you. She is not consciously choosing to analyze the situation. It happens naturally, because your absence created something unfinished, something that did not reach a clear conclusion. And the mind does not like unfinished experiences. It tries to complete them. So she starts replaying small moments. The way you reacted, the way you didn't react, the way you handled the shift, the calm in your behavior. And those details which felt normal before start gaining meaning, because now they are being viewed from distance, and distance adds perspective. Now here is where the emotional part begins. When thoughts repeat, when attention stays on something long enough, the brain starts attaching feeling to it. Not intense at first, not overwhelming but noticeable. A slight curiosity, a quiet pull, a sense of something unresolved. And that feeling grows with time because it is not being interrupted. It is not being replaced. It is allowed to exist. And when a feeling is allowed to exist without pressure, it deepens. Now here is the deeper effect. She begins to feel something without clear logic. She might not explain it. She might not even admit it. But she feels a connection to the situation, to you, to the moment that shifted. And once feeling enters, the dynamic is no longer neutral. It becomes active. Because now, even without interaction, you exist in her emotional space. Most men try to create feeling through effort. The man who understands allows feeling to grow through space. And when she starts thinking about you again, without you doing anything, that is when the shift becomes real. Point number 5, when she feels the need to reconnect. There is a moment where the internal process can no longer stay hidden, where the thoughts, the feelings, the quiet curiosity that has been building begins to look for an outlet. And that is the turning point. Not when she fully understands what she feels, but when she feels enough to act on it. Because until now, everything was happening inside her. The awareness, the mental loop, the emotional shift, all of it stayed internal, subtle, controlled. But once the feeling reaches a certain level, something changes. It starts creating pressure. Not negative pressure, but emotional pressure. The kind that makes silence feel incomplete. The kind that makes distance feel noticeable. And that pressure looks for relief. Now understand this clearly. She is not always aware of this process. She might not say, "I miss him," or "I want him back." It doesn't work like that. It's more subtle, more natural, more instinctive. She just feels the need to reconnect, and that need shows up in small ways. A message that feels casual, a reaction to something you posted, a question that doesn't seem important, but underneath it there is intention, because what she is really doing is trying to re-enter the connection, trying to understand what changed, trying to feel the same thing again. Now here is where most men lose everything they built. The moment she reaches out, they react instantly. They become available again. They return to the same energy as before. And without realizing it, they remove the gap that created the shift. They bring everything back to normal. And when everything becomes normal again, the feeling fades, because the tension disappears. But when you understand the process, when you recognize the moment for what it is, something else happens. You don't rush. You don't overinvest. You respond, but with control, with calm, with the same grounded energy that created the shift in the first place. And that keeps the dynamic alive. Because now she feels that the connection is not something she can instantly go back to, that there is still space, that there is still something to understand, and that increases her investment. Most men think the message is the goal, but the message is just the door. The real power is how you walk through it. Point number 6, why she comes back with more respect. When she comes back after that space, after that silence, after that internal process you didn't interrupt, something feels different. Not louder, not more dramatic, but more intentional, more aware, more grounded in a way that wasn't there before. Because before the distance, the connection was flowing easily, maybe even automatically. It didn't require much thought, much awareness, much evaluation. It simply existed. And when something exists without being questioned, it is often taken for granted. But once the gap was created, once the pattern broke, once her mind had time to process the absence and feel the shift, the connection stopped being automatic. It became something she noticed, something she evaluated, something she felt, and that changes how she returns. Now understand this clearly. She is not just coming back to continue what was there. She is coming back with awareness of what it felt like when it was gone. And that awareness creates respect, because now she understands something she didn't fully see before. She understands that your presence is not guaranteed, that your attention is not constant, that your energy is not something she can assume will always be there no matter what. And that realization shifts the dynamic. Because now, instead of you trying to hold the connection, she becomes more conscious of it. She becomes more attentive, more careful, more aware of how she engages, not in a forced way, but in a subtle, internal way. Because she felt the difference. Now here is the part most men miss. This new dynamic is fragile, not weak but sensitive, because it is still shaped by the space that created it. And what you do next decides everything. If you go back to the old pattern, if you become overly available, overly reactive, overly invested too quickly, you remove the very thing that created the respect. You erase the contrast, and without contrast, there is no value. But if you stay grounded, if you keep the same calm, controlled presence, if you engage without losing your position, something else happens. The respect deepens. Because now she sees consistency. She sees that the shift was not temporary, that your behavior is not reactive, that your presence comes from stability. And stability creates trust. Most men focus on getting her back. The man who understands focuses on how she comes back. And when she comes back with awareness, the connection is no longer the same. It becomes stronger, more real, and built on something deeper than before. Point number 7, why she sees you differently after the distance. There is a point where the distance stops being just a phase and becomes a filter. Not for the connection, for her perception of you. Because after everything that happened, the pullback, the silence, the space, the return, something inside her has changed. Not dramatically, not in a way she will explain, but in a way she feels every time she interacts with you again. Before the distance, she experienced you in motion, constant communication, consistent attention, a predictable rhythm. And in that rhythm, even if the connection was good, it was still normal, familiar, easy to understand. But after the distance, that familiarity is gone, and what replaces it is awareness. Because now she has felt two versions of you, the one who was present and the one who wasn't. And that contrast creates clarity, not logical clarity, emotional clarity. She understands something she didn't fully see before. She understands what your absence feels like. And once someone feels your absence, they can no longer take your presence for granted. Now understand this clearly. This is not about making her value you through loss. It is about revealing the true weight of your presence by removing it long enough for it to be felt. Because when something is always there, it blends into the background. But when it disappears, it becomes visible. And that visibility changes perception. Now here is where it becomes powerful. When she sees you again, when she interacts with you again, she is not experiencing you the same way. She is more aware, more attentive, more sensitive to your energy. Because she knows now that you are not constant, that you are not automatic, that your presence is not guaranteed. And that creates respect, not forced, not requested, felt. Now here is the deeper truth. Most men try to increase their value by adding more attention, more effort, more presence. But the man who truly shifts perception does something different. He creates contrast, and contrast is what makes people feel. Because without contrast, nothing stands out. Most men stay the same. The man she sees differently is the one who allows her to feel the difference. And once she feels that difference, she doesn't go back to seeing you the same way again. At the end of all this, you realize something most men never understand. The moment she pulls back is not the moment you lose her. It's the moment you reveal yourself. Because distance doesn't destroy attraction, it exposes it. And your reaction to that distance decides everything. If you chase, you reduce your value. If you panic, you confirm instability. If you try to fix it, you create pressure. But if you stay grounded, if you allow space, if you don't rush to control the moment, something else happens. She starts thinking, she starts feeling, she starts coming back. Not because you forced it, but because she experienced it. And that is the difference. Because what is forced fades, but what is felt stays. So the real power is simple. Not reacting when everything tells you to react, not chasing when everything tells you to chase, not breaking when everything feels uncertain. Because in that moment, you are not losing control, you're gaining it. And once you understand that, you stop fearing distance, you stop fearing silence, you stop fearing the shift, because you know that's exactly where everything begins. Remember, knowledge means nothing without action. If you're ready to rise above emotion and lead with purpose, join the community today at the link below. Enroll once, grow forever,